filled with impossibility. The space in this text is the space of the suffering servant. The people of Israel, they opened up a space amongst the Gentiles. Right? Similar to the suffering servant, in the text, God has done a great deal with the space that is your body, between your heart, your head, the soles of the feet. You have already lived a life that signals to us the ultimate imaginative moment of accomplishment and achievement by God. And it is celebrated above all because all of you have trusted your ability to make something out of the space that is your body. You were not satisfied with being a waste of space. You went to class. You learned about ways of knowing the world. In each of these ways, science, math, chemistry, theology, philosophy, psychology, you have encountered the imagination of others. You encounter other folks' imagination. Teachers, administrators, and all those you look up to, academically and spiritually, began from communities similar to this one. Communities that were willing to sacrifice, like the suffering servant. They were willing to sacrifice so that you could have the freedom to imagine another possible world. A new way of living, the real, and making the dreams real. Those dreams of our ancestors, those dreams of your communities. Now, quick story about imagination. At Juilliard, one of the places that grants all these degrees to all these fine musicians, they asked some of the professors, how has music changed over 50 years? How are the students when they come into the classroom? They said, oh boy, the students are so talented. We can put any piece of music in front of them that you can imagine they can play it. But they can't compose. They can't imagine. You can. You can choose. You can be satisfied with being just talented and working in other people's imagination. Or you can choose to work the full capacity of what's been given to you. While being the hopes and dreams of your community sounds all wonderful and good, it ain't quite as pretty as it sounds. It's not pretty because the community is rarely ready for the work and sacrifice it takes to have their dreams become a reality. They're not ready. You got to get us ready. And so they, like the Gentile kings, the audience in the text, will only want the peace that comes from the suffering servant. Verse 5. But he was wounded for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the punishment that brought us peace. Everybody want to talk about peace. Everybody want to talk about love, happiness. Everybody want to talk about throwing up both their hands. But to be clear, you are not the parallel in the text is you are not the people in the text that are receiving the peace. I'm suggesting to you that you have to be these suffering servants in the text. Okay. You are that dusty root in verse 2. Yeah, I came all the way from South Bend to call you dusty. Like a root out of dry ground. Dusty. I want you to embrace your inner dusty rootedness. In the days ahead, you will imagine new ways of representing your faith and new ways of talking about and thinking about the world that are not yet in practice. We haven't seen it yet. We're waiting on you. In the beginning stages, people will look at you and what you're doing like the Gentiles looked upon Israel. Your imagination of space will be looked at like that old root plant, that dusty thing that no one desires. People might say, can anything good come from Pascagoula, Gulfport, Marsh Point? They said it to somebody else too. Some might even say, how can you be black and still choose to live in a state that is perceived across the world, primarily synonymous with racism and anti-black violence? You from Mississippi? Rufus? They still got black folks there? Yeah, we here, we ain't going anywhere. In these moments, I want you to return to these passages in Isaiah and remember the servant. the despised, the spit upon, the ones who get handcuffed and thrown down by crooked police, the ones who innovate and create while others take the credit, the suffering servants, you know them, the makers of blues, jazz, hip-hop, R&B, political science, theological geniuses, those who are the embodiment of these dreams. The dreams our ancestors could only dream. They could only dream because they were not free enough to live them out.
That's right. All right. Speak that.
Will you take the freedom that was given and live it out? It was too risky for them. When I say risky, I mean it was risky unto death. And many of them, like Nat Turner and others, risked it anyhow, and they died as living enactments of God's divine freedom. Or, let's get a little bit closer, as Pulitzer Prize-winning hip-hop artist, the first hip-hop artist to ever win the Pulitzer, Kendrick Lamar. He reminds us that our life is an offering. In many of his songs, he moans the refrain, for the dead homies. For the dead homies. In these words, Kendrick lets us know that his art, the work of his imagination, is an offering to the dead. Such an offering ain't easy. He was not always a Pulitzer Prize-winning MC. He had some flops. All right. He had some albums that didn't make it onto the record. There were times when his career was limited to the back of a car and a beat CD. But through it all, he has lived and imagined through his art a world in which his dead homies can live through. What will you create that the ancestors can dance in? Wow. What will you create? When we listen closely to Kendrick, we see that the reality he opens up is that there are many people who ain't really dead, and they living dead. Right. And his dead homies are giving him more life than the living. Wow. Living for the dead amongst those who are living dead requires enduring spaces where you can't hear nobody praying. As Kendrick says, ain't nobody praying for me. There's hidden meaning here. What Kendrick means is that nobody who can help him is praying. Nobody with the means to help him is praying. They person non grata. People in this room ain't gonna fall. But there's gonna be some folk you encounter, they ain't gonna pray for you. They're not gonna pray for you. This is the message in Isaiah. The suffering servant is the community of Israel, chosen as God's canvas to illustrate God's love to the world. The suffering servant is a people who live in a way that is unimaginable to the Gentiles, who benefit from the very way they choose to live. Deeply committed to their ancestors, they dead homies, who remind them how to live in deep relationship to the God of life. They imagine a new life inspired by the giver of life despite their suffering. You dance even when it don't feel good. You write poems even when it don't feel good. You produce art when it doesn't feel good. Like the servant, you must endure. You must endure all-nighters in the library. Endure through the late-night moments of cramming for exams. The dedication to small things for a long time is more important than the dedication to everything for a short time. Why do you have to do this? Your generation has work to do. It is your generation that must produce cutting-edge public policy that will end the vicious, pernicious nature of the policing of the poor. Our systems police the poor under the guise of service and protection. Too many officers get away with the bruising of innocent people. Too many of us get away with not holding them accountable. Some of these diseases that you all have to cure. There are schools that you have to build. Your generation will have to deal with the injustice and inequality in a fully online world built by complex equations, computer programs, algorithms, artificial intelligence. Yes, the internet can call me an N-word based on an algorithm. Your generation will do all of this and more if you can accept this one thing: the reality of failure. Now, y'all, man, I'm like, we supposed to be graduating. This man coming up in here talking about failure. I'm not failure. You're talking about me. Don't call me Dusty and he say I'm a failure. What is he talking about? I want to talk about failure because it is the biggest mistake of my generation, the millennials. We made a mistake. We made a wrong turn. We sugarcoated and insulated youth from the necessary hard teacher that is failure. One of the most problematic ideas that prevent young adults from meeting the teacher that is failure is captured in this phrase. You done heard it before. Failure is not an option. Y'all heard it before. You heard that? Failure is not an option. I submit to you today that the way people interpret this phrase is just flat wrong. It's messed up. It ain't right. As we say in my business, we got to critique this thing. We got to perform a different hermeneutics on this. All that means is we got to think about it differently. Right? Those who speak this phrase are talking about their ego and the zero-sum game. That means it's got to be a winner and a loser that we play in this country. See, in this great experiment called America, the main thing we value is winning. We have lost our ability to encounter the most important thing. We've lost our ability to encounter loss. Loss. Every year we watch athletic tournaments, business owners, students, and executives compete for the #1 spot. You will encounter this death-dealing idolatry of winning at work, in classrooms, on research teams, in clubs and organizations. And yes, if we are not careful, even in our sacred spaces, our churches and homes. You know, you got a brother or sister, and sometimes you fight over stuff. You want to be mama or daddy's favorite, grandma's favorite. You want to win. Everybody wants the thrill of victory, but no one wants the agony of defeat. As that old bluesy spiritual says, high is high, low is low. Everybody want to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Everybody wants to win. Popular recording, DJ Khaled. Popular recording artist, DJ Khaled and T-Pain remind us all that all they do is win, 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 no matter what. But if we watch the text, Isaiah 53, if we watch the text, if we heed the wisdom in Isaiah, we will not make this mistake. We will not make winning an idol. We will not make winning more important than our relationship with God and others. The Gentiles in the text are blinded by their perceived victory over life. They are so busy #winning that they can't see the keeper of the revelation of God. It's not the kings of the world, but it's the suffering servants of the world that are the people of God. To the Gentiles, a suffering servant is a loser, a failure. They were persona non grata, they were trash, disposable, nothing in them was desirable. Us old heads in the millennial generation would say, those suffering servants were suckers. But Isaiah wants us to see that life with God is not about winning. Instead, it's about imagining possibility amongst peoples and spaces that are deemed failures. Isaiah is encouraging you to accept the reality and the great teacher that is failure. It is the suffering servant who emerges as the real keeper of knowledge. They are ultimately the ones that will rewrite history in the terms of the losers. Meridian, Mississippi native and hip-hop recording artist Big Crit. Y'all know Big Crit? No? Okay. Check him out. He speaks to this well in his song called Confetti. The lyrics speak to all those artists who think they have won once and